I will say this kind of slowly because I think it's probably the most important part. Nobody will ever ask for your personal information, ever. Right? If they are asking, it's a scam. That's just, I know that sounds like a broad generalization, but it's still right. There is no call that says, hey, you need to unlock your account, give me your ID password. Never happens. Companies don't behave that way. The IRS doesn't behave that way. Medicare doesn't behave that way. The police don't behave that way. So nobody calls and says, I need your information.
Hey y'all, this is Kosta, and today I'm here with my guest, Todd Rovak, CEO and co-founder at Carefull, the first digital platform built for older adults and their families to protect money, credit, identity, and critical documents. Today we're talking about how to protect seniors from online scams and fraud. Todd, welcome to the podcast. To start off, would you mind to share a bit more about your background and what led to the creation of Carefull?
So I used to run a firm out of New York that built products for banks. The business was called Fahrenheit. We built products for Wells Fargo and Vanguard and Chase and Citi and American Express. And the more things I built over 10 years, the more I saw everything being built for Gen Z and millennials and everything you can build, right? Let's build an interesting, sexy interface, a new widget, a new app. And yet, really nothing being built for people 55 plus. And it was always a question, well, okay, we'll get to that eventually, but they never got to it. And I kind of started to feel like there was this gap in actually just taking care of this entire generation, right? We call it at Carefull, we call it G1, like the generation that has created wealth, has money. There's no money in a Chime account, right? And so I just became drawn to, can these people have assets? These people need more built for them.
The statistic, if I'm not mistaken, is 83% of the wealth in the United States is controlled by people that are over the age of 60.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
And yeah, it's more fun. It's to invent, we think, for young people, it's important. It's important, but someone 55 plus is completely with it, is going to be around a long time, has the assets. And so it's just this desert of invention and innovation in some ways. There's all these myths, which we'll probably talk about, that they're not tech savvy. They totally are. And so sometimes just savvy enough to be dangerous. And so, we need to build, I thought we needed to build for them. So that was one. And then maybe second, I remember being pretty little and listening to my parents at the time deal with my grandparents who have, of course, since passed. And it was such a mess. It was just such a mess dealing with someone else's money. There are 45 million people in the U.S. who are what we call financial caregivers, right? People who's dealing with someone else's money. Everybody gets it. And there are no tools and no solutions. If you have to do it, you have to basically log in and hack and basically impersonate your parents, right? It's the only way to help out with someone else's money. You have to share passwords. You have to commingle funds. I remember my parents dealing with it, kind of arguing with their siblings and arguing with the parents. What a mess, right? And everybody experiences this in some way. And so, anyway, so it's a little of what led me to build Carefull with my co-founder Max.
And I am very fascinated in that second part about the sibling interaction and how, so I want to know a lot more about that, and we'll get to it towards the end of the show. But right now, I want to talk about just the scale of this problem. Yeah. Carefull has been successful in protecting $2 billion of transactions from fraud and financial threats in 2022 alone. Yeah. Can you walk us through the different types of financial scams that seniors are most vulnerable to and how Carefull specifically addresses these threats?
Yeah, happy to. So, and by the way, it's $3 billion now. It's about how quickly it's how quickly kind of people are adopting Carefull because we're
great.
Just a gap. So, just to give in broad strokes. Fake fraud alerts are probably the number one thing that is going around right now, and there's a lot of different flavors of this. But it looks like it comes from your bank. It says like bank fraud alert. It's supposed to create anxiety. It's supposed to make you panic a little bit. So usually right now it's coming by text. We're used to it coming by phone, but right now it's coming by text. Did you approve a transaction for $1,000? And then you reply yes or no. I'll get into what happens next, but that's a big category of kind of false alerts. But they're also coming from non-financial institutions. They're coming from Amazon, from Netflix, from PayPal. By the way, they're not actually coming from there. They seem to come from Amazon, Netflix, and PayPal.
They like impersonate the vendor. Right.
Yeah, and they have to asking you to click on a link to unlock your account, prevent your membership from being canceled. Right, there's something you have to fix. Usually, that's usually the theme. Depending on however they sort of phrase it, that's what they're asking for.
Sure.
Just to tick off a few more, and we can go a little deeper on any of these. Medicare enrollment is a bad one right now. You'll get a fake call saying, "Hey, we can help you with new options for a fee. We'll help you." But this is completely kind of made up. But we'll help you navigate, save some money, and it's time for Medicare re-enrollment. It sounds official. It's just confusing, and that confusion leads to what all of this is really looking for, which is just enough personal information, right? Can I just say enough to get your Social Security, a password I can use, something like that? Everything else is just smoke, right? Smoke and mirrors. Few more just to keep the list going. Gift card scams have been around a long time. Gift cards are lovely for your grandkid. They are also a money laundering technique. It's a way for scammers to get you to. It's very hard to trace, and so gift card scams have lots of different shapes. But you'll get a call, and for some reason they'll say, "Oh, and we need to be paid in gift cards. Here, please go to buy at Target, Walmart." It sounds like all of these, by the way, we laugh about because they sound ridiculous, and yet we it's not kind of one off. It's the way that they present these things. Usually, it's the IRS. You owe a certain amount of money. The easiest way to do that is. It's the way they do it. It's just confusing, right? And so, no, everybody doesn't fall for it, but a lot of people do, and they're not. And they're not. Yeah.
And if I can just interject one point, I think a lot of it also comes down to the fact that we're just so busy.
Yes.
And even people that are over the age of 55 may still be working.
Yeah.
Or this is something that I see all the time because some of our clients that we care for, they fall victim to these scams on occasion as well. And usually what happens is they find, through a Google search, a potential relative or a number of names that are associated with that individual. And they say Johnny's in jail and needs $300 to get bailed out. And here's the card, here's the information. Please provide your card number and we'll let him go. And I know that also sounds rather ridiculous, but if you're at times maybe even isolated because you can't leave your home because of a disability and you're elderly and you can part with $300 because 83% of the wealth is controlled by everybody over the age of 60, it's pretty easy. And there are professional organized crime rings, whether it's in Jamaica or in Nigeria, that have been documented to do this for a living.
Yo, it's a job.
It's astounding.
It's a job, and you're talking about a flavor of what we call the grandchild scam, right? Grandkid in trouble, needs needs help to XYZ, right? They have just enough information, they know the name, and what you're saying there is, and this is probably a really important thread. Time and urgency is like the big thing, right? Of that call, you get that at noon when you're relaxed. And you'll kind of question it. You get that call at 11:30 when you're by yourself, 11:30 p.m. You get that call at 1 a.m. Kids in trouble, right? It's time, and they know that they know just what they're doing.
How does Carefull interject into this to help stop some of these things? Yeah,
so Carefull is a financial protection service that you sign up for, or it's given to you by a bank or a wealth advisor. And it's for adults over 55, but it's also for the kids who are involved in the daily money matters of an aging parent. Its job, basically, it's a big AI engine. Its job, it monitors whatever you want to connect, checking accounts, credit cards, savings accounts, brokerage accounts, your home title. And it basically is a second set of, think of it as a big, smart second set of eyes, does nothing, in the background, looking to defend your identity, your credit, your savings. And so it's looking for those scams, right? The type of money movement, those transactions that look really suspicious. We can see when you're buying 3 gift cards. No way. Okay. We can see when that, when you're doing that, we can see something we'll talk about like, peer-to-peer payments, right? The Venmo and Zelle scam that are going around right now. It's pretty brutal. We can see that stuff. So basically, it's a monitoring engine that's looking for your strange usage of basically things that disproportionately affect older adults. And so, there's a new caregiver in your life. There's a new person you're moving money to. Bank's not going to find it because it's not a huge amount of money, but we see that as a behavior change. So that's really what the heart of what Carefull does. You sign up for it, it works in the background, and then gets ahead of this stuff and says, we saw this. Looks like you're making duplicate payments. By the way, that's not fraud. It's a sign of cognitive decline, Alzheimer's, dementia. But that's pretty closely related to vulnerability. And so we see patterns that look like forgetfulness, that look like poor judgment, that look like you're donating way too much to charity relative that you usually do. We're going to spot things like that. The things that what we have is a smarter brain, I think, that knows what to look for older adults.
I think people need to understand just how big this problem is. Yeah. A few years back, I did a study on financial exploitation, and this statistic kind of blew my mind. So 62% of people that are over the age of 65 that is, are financially exploited in some way. 5 out of 6 times it happens by a family member.
Absolutely. I was hoping we often find we have to explain that second part to people, right? It's really insightful point you're making, because people think about elder fraud and elder abuse and as something that comes from Nigeria, right? Like you mentioned, and that's kind of what's in the mind of most people. It comes from the outside, but so much comes from within the trusted circle, and only 1 out of 44 instances of that goes reported, because you don't report your cousin, you don't send the kid,
sister or somebody,
you send them to the police. You freak out and you panic, and you have your family goes to war with each other, but you don't report it. Should, but you don't. And so you're absolutely right. Absolutely right.
And we mentioned that, people that are over the age of 65, seniors, they're pretty tech savvy. But I think we have to also consider and identify the fact that it does take some time for people to become proficient with various online financial platforms.
Yes.
So what steps do you recommend seniors take to build their digital literacy and safely navigate online banking and transactions?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. One, getting comfortable with online banking in general. There's a chunk of a good segment, I should say, of people that feel that checks are safer, right? And so we also often see some pushback. We hear through our banking partners that people they can't be protected because they're not using online banking. And the first thing I would say is there are just as many scams going around that are affecting checks. Check washing is a famous one where a check is
What's that?
So check washing is literally the oldest trick in the book, and it's back. So basically, a check is fished out of your mailbox. You use checks. You decide you're still going to use checks to pay your bills. They will, with a hanger, and a gum on the end, they will get envelopes out of your mailbox. They take the check, they open the envelope, they wash the check, the amount, they rewrite the amount as a larger amount. They rewrite that to themselves, and it is brutal, right? Check washing has spiked over the last couple of years. Wow. It's manual, right? It's a manual thing, and so the idea that I do everything myself by hand, I don't trust digital online is a problem more than it's actually a solution to anything. And so that's, I think, a place we start. Having things going through your bank's online platform is safer. It typically will trigger, particularly if you're using certain account types, it triggers some fraud and recourse and protections and things like that. And so we encourage people to use online banking. We also encourage auto recurring payments. So this is simple, right? And if you're, in your 30s, 40s, 50s, used to doing it, but let it auto payment, right? Like take out the middleman, right? Like the part where you're always involved in something. The less hands in things, the better. And so set up a recurring payment. Check on it now and then. Log in, but you don't have to do everything manually. It sometimes feels good because it's an old habit. I know where I am. I'm going to go through my things. I'm going to pay it every month myself. That's how I keep control of things. Control being the big theme that a lot of seniors are looking for. However, every time you're entering in data, thinking it through, every time you're doing something like that, you're giving someone else a chance to get data from you. And so just set it and forget it. Put things on auto pay. It's also safer for lots of reasons.
Based off your experience, and I don't know how much like hands-on work that you have with the senior community, but I would almost think that after you get to a certain point in life, you have the experience and you've done life for 30, 40, 50 years as an adult, you'd think that you would probably have a pretty good grasp on your financial situation. You may even check your bank account every single day just to make sure that the same amount of money is there in the transactions, because what possibly could you be spending your money on after you're 65 versus when you've got tons of kids running around and all that stuff, right?
I think it's what drives. First of all, what I've learned, because we are really hands-on with our customers and their families.
Great.
You can never really guess. You'd think some people would be on autopilot and really experienced. But what they really are is into a routine that they trust, and a routine that makes them feel in control and safe.
I see.
And that is really the bedrock. More than an adult. Let's just get to like anxiety and fear, which I think is part of a lot of this. What people fear more than being scammed is losing control of their finances, like losing control. And someone's going to take control at some point. I'm 55. I'm fine. I'm not even old. I don't need my kids. So when you get a little old, you get 65, 75. What you start to worry about, either in the back of your mind or you talk about it, is somebody stepping in and you kind of being your hands being taken off the wheel.
Right.
And so part of the rituals and the behaviors that we see a lot are not really based on how much money I have or the spend management. It's just based on a feeling of control. And so that's typically what we see. Monitoring though, and just the basic hygiene that's expected today, right? Carefull exists because everybody should have credit monitoring. Everybody should have identity theft insurance. This is kind of table stakes hygiene now because we just live in a digitally dangerous world. And so control or not, everybody should be backed up in some way. And we think that's important.
Is that the best way to manage their finances and to minimize the risk of falling victims to scams and fraud?
So it actually is. So there's I think about it as proactive and defensive things, and then there's how do I make sure I catch it?
Right.
There's good behavior, which if I could give like one piece of advice,
please,
it is no matter what wrapper a text message comes in or a phone call comes in, the urgency, the time of day, the relative, whatever package you are communicated with. And I will say this kind of slowly because I think it's probably the most important part. Nobody will ever ask for your personal information, ever. Right? If they are asking, it's a scam. That's just I know that sounds like a broad generalization, but it's still right. There is no call that says, "Hey, you need to unlock your account. Give me your ID." Never happens. Companies don't behave that way. The IRS doesn't behave that way. Medicare doesn't behave that way. The police don't behave that way. So nobody calls and says, "I need your information." So if you don't have to memorize every scam, you don't have to stay up to date. Like Carefull monitoring services, we'll do that for you. So we'll get to that. But if you just want to be proactively, have good hygiene and be defensive, you are in control of your information. You only need to give someone that information when you want to go do something.
Yeah.
But anytime someone sends you an email or a call, here's a UPS, so I need to deliver a package. All I need is your XYZ, your address. And so just have that trigger, right? As if you could just build that reaction to like, nope. The downside of not giving it, right, is so little compared to the downside of giving it if you're not sure. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what happens when someone is in fact scammed or is a victim of fraud?
Yeah.
How does Carefull come in and pick up on the warning signs or even on the actual transaction itself to alert people to say, hey, there's a 90% likelihood that this is a scam?
Yeah. So the first thing is you have to know what to look for. And that means knowing what looks normal to a bank or to anybody, but actually is probably uniquely dangerous for older adults. Let's use a fun one, right? Charitable political donations, right? These are not scams, okay? They can be. There are plenty of fake charity scams, but they're often just a little bit of bad judgment. What we find a lot is our financial caregivers meaning our 45-year-olds are noticing, wow, my parents just donated a lot to this thing. And this happens all the time. It's not a scam necessarily, but you have to know to look for charitable donations. Even within that, let's take political donations. Okay, both political parties, doesn't matter where you live, who you vote for, both political parties have convinced older adults that the world is ending, and they have to donate to a candidate, and right now, and what they're also usually agreeing to is a monthly deduction. And so, donate to charity. Like, charity is not a bad thing. Political donations, go nuts, right? However, the amount and the regularity of that, we have people, in fact, we've programmed Carefull to look for recurring deductions, sometimes in a year. We find a year after the election, right? The election's been lost or won, and we see these deductions going because they didn't uncheck the right box.
That's wild.
Yeah, it's crazy, but there's a lot of that, right? And we have so we're looking for patterns. So your bank doesn't care, right, if you make a political donation because it's not fraud. But what is it, right? It's that gray area of like, well, I probably didn't mean to donate $2,000 per month. So we to answer your question, we're looking for individuals. So when you sign up for Carefull, instantly within an hour, we've looked back 2 years and we know what normal looks like for each individual person. And then when we start seeing things that look like behavior change, for instance, I stopped spending at CVS or Walgreens by, let's say, 2/3. Well, that means you may not be taking care of yourself, buying medicine. It doesn't. If you're over a certain age, I'm using cash now. We can even spot patterns like there's a caregiver that usually buys things for your kind of an aging parent, and now they're buying things for themselves. Right? We call it, it's a form of caregiver fraud. Like they buy gas for themselves every time on the way home. Not going to call the police, but we can see that, right? Strange amounts.
Right.
And so we're looking for patterns in the transactions. In the data, you can see all kinds of things.
And is that AI powered, or do you have like a group of people in some room that's just like literally going through every single bank
it's
account?
AI powered. It's AI powered. So we have a group of data scientists that are building that engine, but it's AI powered. So what you have to do is build the engine that knows what to look for, and then and then its job is it can see that. So it's
incredible.
The reason we've seen over 3 billion transactions is you turn on Carefull and instantly we know what normal looks like for you. Right? So in a few minutes.
And so we touched on this at the very beginning. We talked about family members. Obviously, financial exploitation is a big deal amongst family members with aging parents. But the other aspect of that is the kind of the issues that arise when you have multiple siblings that are trying to all have input as to what's best for their mom or their dad or both, right? So how does Carefull implement the sort of the foundation so that families can remain families?
Yes.
And they're not all financial planners and playing the good guy and the bad guy.
This is a really good question. And the family, we call it faster fixes, fewer fights, really is kind of what we want to get to. Sitting here, the reason I kind of love this question is because families think that their family's crazy. and that their family is the worst, right? And that, oh, my bum brother who lives in LA is not doing anything for mom, and I'm doing all the work. So everybody feels that that their family is the worst. It's not. It's because it's hard to do this, and every family gets here. So that's the first thing. What Carefull has put into this space is a trusted contacts, what we call kind of a trusted contacts infrastructure, which is shorthand for we have a permissioning system where different members of the family can view or access different things. So the kids can see alerts, but again, it's read only. They're not getting access to mom's account. But all the kids can see the same thing. Let's say it was a duplicate payment or a strange donation or what looks like fraud. All the kids see the same thing. Already now we're having the same conversation. We're not saying mom is losing it. What do you mean? We're using objective data, right? So we share alerts if we want to with the family. We identify who the trusted contacts are, and so what the relationship is, and then that can be used to say, okay, family member X should have, we have a password manager, probably should have mentioned, should have access to the password manager. Family member Y should have access to the document vault. Family member Z should have access to nothing because we don't, that guy's spending mom's money on his band practice, right? So right. We want to permission people to get visibility into the right things. And then that creates a much healthier dynamic of everybody not kind of piling on. So that I think that sharing is transparency is how we do it.
And I think you just nailed it right there. I think it provides the transparency among siblings so that everybody understands their role.
Yes.
And I see this somewhat mirrored whenever people sign up for power of attorneys.
Yes.
And they have to go through like the conversation with their siblings about like, okay, listen, I have a nursing degree, so I'm going to be the medical power of attorney. Yeah. And the other person is, I've got a accounting degree, so I'll be the financial power of attorney. And then the brother with band practice is not a power of attorney at all, know?
Yeah.
I love that you took that process though, and you've digitized it.
Yeah. And hopefully made it easier. We have full-time writers who just help people talk to their parents about this stuff and their siblings.
Nice.
We have about 150 articles on how to talk to your mom about donations or bill pay, how to talk to your siblings, and because people they don't just lack the infrastructure and the technology, they lack the language, and that's what causes all the fights of, you have 2/3 of the time it's oldest daughter who's in there like doing this, and then you have everyone sending checks, without going down the rabbit hole there, it's people need more structure through which to do what is a very natural financial life stage. We all treat it like a car crash because it feels that way. Like it's unexpected, and now everyone has to panic and fight with each other. This is a normal life stage, and it's not even a quick one. It's a 20-year life stage, what we call financial caregiving, from independent older adult to where the kids aren't involved, to when that relationship, all the way in versus to when the kids are really in charge, right? And that's a 20-year phase. So, digital tools help.
Absolutely. What role do financial institutions and government agencies play in combating financial scams targeted at seniors?
Yeah.
And are there any collaborative efforts or initiatives that our listeners should be aware of?
Yeah, so a couple of thoughts here. The first one's kind of frustrating, which for people, whenever we say it's... meaning, the Consumer Financial Protection Board is out there giving guidelines. People don't listen, but it's out there. And they have, if you really want to see what they're recommending, like, should I open a joint bank account with my parents? There's inheritance issues there. Or if you have that same question about whether you should get your kids involved, there are recommendations from the CFPB about, it's called a convenience account. Most people don't know to ask for it. Mm-hmm. And so there are decent guidelines and direction coming from some government organizations. AARP Fraud Watch, run by a great leader named Kathy Stokes, and she tries to stay on top of, her organization does, I should say, stay on top of the latest scams. And you can always call them and check to see if something is a scam. Mm-hmm. But most of the action right now is happening at the Oh, I should say, by the way, there's also reportfraud.ftc.gov. People don't like that answer because it sounds like giving doesn't sound like getting help. It sounds like putting something out into space. It's useful. I should say it's there's some resources there. But most of the action right now is happening at the state level, and there are 25 states that have, and more coming, that have issued guidance to banks and financial institutions that they have to do more. Just to give you an example, right? There's a new law in Michigan. It's not probably the latest one, but a new law in Michigan that just went into effect in the fourth quarter of last year that says banks have to do more to spot elder fraud, to spot elder abuse, to freeze accounts if they suspect something. We are past the time when a financial institution or a wealth advisor can just kind of like see accounts being drained and mistakes being made and fraud and say, I'm just the bank.
Right.
It's not my job. It is. It actually is. And particularly when everything is happening digitally. And so there are now a lot of new laws that are driving the financial institutions to do more. And so I guess I would say you should ask, it is worth, ask your bank, ask your credit union, ask your wealth advisor, ask your parents, a bank, credit union, what do you provide? Chances are they do or are planning to. Frankly, I know this because we have banks offer Carefull, right? Banks and wealth advisors provide Carefull to their clients, credit unions as well. If it's not Carefull, they should provide something, at least credit monitoring, at least identity theft insurance. So,
and correct me if I'm wrong, but Carefull combines the component of credit monitoring and bank monitoring.
Yes.
So essentially, just so that listeners understand, you take a platform like Truebill, and you take a platform like Equifax, or Experian, whatever it might be, and you put it together, and you have Carefull. But there's components of Carefull that separate it from both of those platforms.
Yeah.
And the actual separation comes in the fact that you are creating essentially a dashboard for families to manage the financial well-being of their parents.
Yes. There's an actual client to customer experience here, right? It's not something you sign up for and wait to get terrifying emails from your credit monitor, right? You get that email, it does more harm than good. It's nice to get it, but you're like, whoa, God, what do I do now? And our job, right, is to combine what you said, but combine a password manager, combine identity theft insurance, combine dark web monitoring, add you think of it as like full stack financial safety. Add home title monitoring, right? Is anyone messing with your title? Anything you can think of should be in one simple place. And then there should be an experience where the family can make sure everything's okay. Like, is there enough to pay the bills next month? Is there an identity breach? What do I do about it? That needs to have a place and an experience. That's where we're different.
How big is this problem?
So it depends on what number you choose. The number that we pick is right in the middle of, you have about 50 billion of elder fraud at this point every year. Again,
every year,
at least half of that's coming from within the trusted circle. It's probably a lot more. It's just hard to it's hard to get that. There's about $34,000 on average for those that are victimized. It's a lot of money for people who are hit by elder abuse and elder fraud, and it's getting. The aging population is growing, not shrinking, right? Our demographics in the U.S. are such that, we have more and more people retiring. We have 84 trillion of wealth transfer underway right now to Gen X. And all kinds of shenanigans happening as people step in front of that, whether it's stepping in front of a life insurance beneficiary, an annuity stream, people messing with long-term care policies, like you name it. People will come up with it, right? And so there's a lot of vulnerability. The other kind of issue, which unfortunately I don't have a number for, but a big spike in cognitive decline in Alzheimer's, and vulnerability and cognitive decline, as you would imagine, are pretty related, right? And so
it increases exponentially.
Yes.
So when you look at the future of Carefull, are you trying to create kind of a one-stop shop to lock down all these liabilities in one platform and say, okay, this is the company that you use to ensure that bad things don't happen with my mom and dad's money?
It is. That, we believe there is a need in the market for what we call just financial safety. right? This big, broad idea of financial safety is my identity, my driver's license, my passport, my bank accounts, my house, the way my family interacts, the caregivers that are involved in my money, my wealth advisor. Financial safety should be one simple place, one simple account that is the hygiene, right? And that is the hygiene for the next 20 years, right? And then, frankly, don't think about it. And we don't want to create an army of people who go out into the world worried every day about everything. But frankly, it should be the opposite. They should feel covered. They should feel that they know that something's looking out for them, and that if something bad happens, they have recourse, someone that'll get them back to good. Unfortunately, we've got a generation of people who are winging it right now in a dangerous world, and there's chaos among families. So, one-stop financial safety is really where we think the world will be in the next few months.
Baby boomers, Gen X, they're in this really weird spot. Yeah. Because, like, for example, I'm a millennial, and Life Alert and credit monitoring was on my radar when I was still in high school, right? Oh. And so, when you look at people who grew up in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, they're just that stuff didn't really come onto their radar until they were well into their very, very busy lives. And so digesting and absorbing that information became a lot harder. And so now it's kind of like, okay, when bad things happen, then I'll start thinking about it, whereas you could be more proactive. So I think over time, this is going to be a platform and a process that's going to be much more adopted in the next 10 to 15 years. So I think it's great.
I appreciate that. We're seeing so much. Our biggest growth area, this may surprise you, is wealth insurance and banks giving it to their customers. Just kidding.
That's great.
And that's nice because, first of all, do the right thing for your customer. Of course. And second, it's particularly for who you just described, that sort of person that may feel like this is something that's new or they have to let into their lives, to get it from their financial institution or their insurance agent or someone they trust is much easier, right? It feels like this person's already has a view into my own financial life, and now they're giving me something that can reduce this kind of underlying financial anxiety. It's quite powerful, right? And so I totally agree with you.
So a few more questions, then we're going to wrap up. Let's say that somebody over the age of 65 is scammed, or they discover some type of fraudulent activity. Yeah. What immediate steps, so like steps 1, 2, and 3, should they take to report the issue and minimize the financial damage? Yeah,
okay. So 2 answers, one self-serving and one that's actually helpful. So the self-serving one is we have go to getcarefull.com and click on something called Hack Repair, and it will take you through the steps, right? It's a free thing that will just walk you through. We built it to just give away for just this moment. We found people, it's so hard to calm down when you've been scammed. You don't know where to start. And we wanted to create a starting point, right? And so there's a big button called Hack Repair, which is kind of an online wizard to walk you through it. But nice. But to unpack that, actually what's in it, so that I can give some answers to those who don't. First of all, it depends if someone has access to your device or not, right? If someone has access to your advice, let's say they have used a computer takeover scam. They've pretended to be IT. If they have access to your computer, or you feel they have something on your phone, take that off Wi-Fi right away, right? So disconnect is the first thing, right? Okay. So you don't want somebody else uploading, transacting, doing something from that machine. So take it offline is the first thing we always say. You do want to notify your financial institutions. This, it's not game-breaking stuff, but we want to change passwords quickly, and we have an order in which we want to do that. We want to change financial service. You want to change your bank password, set up 2-factor authentication. And then the thing people often forget is go right to Amazon and go right to the places where you shop. So because that's right where the thieves will go. So they'll go to Target, they'll go to Amazon, they'll go to Etsy, they'll go to Walmart, a few places, because you've got your credit card in there already. You've got your they've got your information, and they're going to buy as many things as they can before you shut it down. So people often forget that step. So we often say, okay, go to your bank, then go to where you shop, and make sure you've at least you've changed those passwords or disconnected the account in some way. If it sounds like work, by the way, it's because it is work. You got to go, yes. You got to do it. It can be done in about an hour, but we want to give you the steps to go through all this stuff. We also say freeze your credit. You can do that with any for free with any of the credit bureaus, but we don't want somebody opening accounts and cards with your personal information.
Right.
That it takes a long time to find out that happened, and so you want to put a credit freeze on your accounts as well. And of course there's other things to do, but those are the big ones, right? Of like, and we consider that like get your arms around it, right? And then you can take a deep breath of like, that is not fun what I just described, right? That sounds what I just described. And people, I say that to people, and like their eyes roll back. They're like, oh, changing one password sounds like worse. But so does losing all your money. So
correct.
I would really suggest you sit down. You say this is going to take an hour. You disconnect one machine, you get on a new machine, and you go through it, right? And so that's the steps.
Will things get better in terms of the technology? Will it become at some point where we don't have to do those things and we have, I don't know, biometric everything or
yes,
just ways of optimizing these processes?
Yes and no. And so the yes is there's new password and authentication technology coming out. You may have read Apple and Google working on these things that kind of take the password out of the equation.
It's great.
That will be great. Things like Apple Pay and those payment technologies are wonderful because they have two-factor built in. They know it's you because it's looking at your face. So I would say things are actually getting better and on a good path to get better.
Good.
Unfortunately, this is an industry. And so like any industry, when things get better, there will be new scams, right? So there have been guys on a wagon selling snake oil for hundreds of years, and they have evolved. They have evolved as the world has evolved. And so right. I guess these some scams, hopefully that I've even talked about, will go away or change. But having a second set of eyes that's job is to keep up with it is always going to be the best answer versus kind of hope technology eliminates scammers, because I actually don't see that happening. What I worry more about, which is an evergreen thing, is aging and cognitive decline and judgment.
Right.
is normal. It's everybody, right? And so let's acknowledge that this is a financial life stage where it's better, instead of saying dad's losing it and then go fight with your family. This is a life stage. So advisors, banks, family, let's have less antagonistic, more transparent technologies,
more collaboration
among families, and acknowledge this is not the end of the world. This is a normal life stage. Dad's fine, but he bought a thing twice. So let's get into things. And so it's a long-winded answer to your question, but I do feel like some of it it's defense. Another step is stepping into the reality of aging and what we call financial caregiving is a natural thing that people are going to have to do for their family.
And I'm optimistic that people like yourself have identified the problem and are building platforms that are going to provide a systemic and a very structured solution. It's online banking was a game changer, and this is just the evolution of online banking for a population of people who are aging. So
look, you have a security system in your house. You should have
exactly.
Think of that as a security system, keeps things from the outside. You should have a smoke detector to make sure you don't screw up on the inside, right? That's a simple way of thinking about safety. Same thing with your financial life, right? Yeah.
So we always like to end the show with a call to action. Can you provide our listeners with some practical tips for verifying the authenticity of communication from financial institutions or government agencies to avoid falling for phishing scams or impersonators?
So it's very hard. I would almost say it's not your job to verify their authenticity because they're going to lie to you. So if you're not sure, forward it to someone you trust. You can forward it to AARP Fraud Watch. They will tell you. You can forward it to Carefull. We have something called Scam Assist, which you can forward a text or an email and say, is this real? Long before you click on it. But the simplest things to do, and I think this is maybe the primary takeaway here is don't click on anything, and nobody will ever ask for your personal information that has it like ever. And so use that as the lens through which you interact with anything. If you're not sure about its authenticity, you're right or wrong. But you don't have to give your information. That's the one thing that will always be true. That will always be true. There is no email and no text that should extract or ask you for information, whether it's a package, the IRS, Medicare, your doctor, whoever. It doesn't work. The world doesn't work that way. So just go into the world thinking with that in mind, and you'll never have to be the person that figures out, is that really PayPal?